This is Superhuman Training.
Playfully embodying the new spiritual renaissance.
I'm Colby Collins.
And I'm Melissa Orion.
And today's topic is sexuality and gender.
Woo!
As it relates to awakening to a new paradigm of living and our values and how we perceive sexuality and gender in ourselves and also in those around us.
And the world at large.
Well,
let's check in first because I'm nervous about this topic because it's a really big one, and it's also one that until we really get into it, I don't really know where it's going to go. So that's exciting. So check-ins. I have had a really big last week. It's been a lot of travel and a lot of faces that I haven't seen in a long time and ones that I really wanted to reconnect with, and there's just been so many layers, and now I'm moving into a new home and feeling really grateful that I get to ground as I'm in between all these different travel destinations. So to have a new space with a muse of mine and get to cultivate this really beautiful temple is such a blessing. So welcome, Colby, to the beginning of the Band of Light headquarters. My new space inside of Elijah Ray's beautiful temple home.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Check in for you. Big. Lots. Are you going to be real? Be real.
Yeah, I think I've been in a reflection of what we were talking about in one of our previous episodes of really owning and creating our space as a foundation for ourselves to arrive. And I've been working on that a lot, feeling some shifts around my place in Portland and potentially doing some traveling in the fall, winter as well. And so just getting ducks in a row, things like that.
Lots of big things to align.
Yes.
Good. Well, I think sexuality-wise, I have things that have happened in my last week that could relate to this. Gender-wise, I don't know so much, so I'll start on the tip of I have been really loving that in the progress of our episodes. In one of our most recent episodes, we talked about the dynamics around relationship anarchy and the empowerment of the embodied person being in love with themselves and in love with life itself, and being in sexuality in a different valuing system than we have now, where it's tied to all of these strings of codependency and attachment. And what I've been recognizing by having muses in my life is that I get to have the love that I have for them, and it's mine. And I get to use that for myself. And then I also get to cultivate sexual relationships, and maybe they're with a muse, or maybe they're with somebody that just feeds my soul in a different way. And I am someone that recognizes that I've got so many different facets to my personality and so many different angles that when I'm met by a particular type of person, that it ignites this angle in myself that hasn't maybe been awakened in a while. And so I got to experience something this last week where there was a polarity between what I've been experiencing in my muses recently that are very in touch with their feminine, and they're very much embodied warriors for the feminine, and they're very much in art. And so the muses of late have just been very sensual in their artistry. And to meet someone and be polarized by a very masculine presence, it really let me just step into my feminine. And this person was tall, and he got to spin me around, and I got to be spun around, I should say. And the energy of being just a light, feminine, flowy creature in balance to this very masculine energy. So I guess that there is something around gender that happened where when we identify as a woman, I very much identify as a woman, but I'm wearing a masculine energy a lot of the time, whether I'm having to parent my children as the father figure sometimes, or whether I'm running a business or just being out in the world. I put on this very masculine presence a lot, and I get things done that way, but it's wonderful to be balanced by somebody that is so embodied in the masculine that it just checks my masculine at the door, and it's like, it's not needed here.
Mm-hmm.
I got all of that. He fixed things for me, moved things. It was just fantastic. And I get to receive that, as we were talking about before, and not attach to it, and not write stories in the future about what that is going to look like, or how I'm going to continually need this person and receive from them, because I got to receive that, and that's my love that I get to have. So there's my check-in that kind of relates to this week.
Yeah, it's interesting just hearing you talk about that. I was just feeling the contrast of my own experience, because to me, I was born into a culture in the South, but really I feel like it's everywhere. All of our idea of what gender identity is and sexuality, and when you're talking about such a strong embodiment of the masculine that would allow me to fully go into my feminine as a man and as a woman, which I feel is totally valid and a beautiful thing, right, for you and for so many people. In my own experience, growing up, I had attractions to both men and women, and the attraction to men or males, since I was growing up in the South, was a lot of shame and hiding it and guilt and all of that. And then, with my girlfriends and the connections with women, I would often hide that part of myself, but also very much enjoy being the man that could connect with those women. And even went into 2 marriages, with that.
Women.
Yeah, with women. And the thing that, and of course I was honest with both of my former wives about, that I related to being bisexual. I remember when I figured out in college, because I was confused when I was a teenager. I was like, I'm either gay or straight. Like that's only 2 options, and you're either one or the other. You have to be. You're either 100% straight, and you're this epitome of what masculinity is in the world, that what the gender identity gets stamped on you, or you're gay. And if you're gay, then you're the epitome in a man, which is very devalued. And where I grew up, it was like the worst. It was the lowest on the totem pole anyone could be, male or female. Women and men both shunned gay men. So almost like, you were born into this privilege as a man, and you're just going to abdicate it to be gay. There's a lot of stuff like that. And so I discovered in college, after I had been very in love with my high school girlfriend and had a lot of erotic feelings for her, and was very, I won't say fulfilled, but at the time, for an 18-year-old, I was very sexually fulfilled with her. But then still feeling the attraction with men, and looking at things online and stuff like that. And then I discovered, I'm like, oh, maybe I don't have to choose. Maybe I could take on this identity as bisexual, right? And so I took that on in my early 20s, and when I met my first wife, and she had said, like, oh, that's totally cool, I'm bisexual too. She was quite a bit older than me. I was with a lot of women in my 20s and all this, maybe you'll grow out of it, or something like that, which was fine. I was, again, very deeply in love with her and fulfilled by our sexual connection, but there was still that part of me that was kind of lingering or nagging there. And what I found in the dynamic of male and female sexual relating was that there was an undercurrent of an expectation that I always embody the masculine energy, that I always hold her, that she gets to be masculine and feminine. When she's in her masculine as my business partner, I've got to fully respect that. But then when she wants to be her feminine, I've got to hold space and support that. And I felt, and I'm not saying anything negative about her, but maybe I'm projecting onto our cultural standard instead of putting it on women or putting it on any one person or group of people. It's really this idea that we have that because I'm in a male embodiment, my feminine energy is less valuable, my feelings are less valuable, and there's less space for my feminine energy to shine, right? And so I had to take that on myself. I disengaged from her, and then of course I had another female wife that came later on. It was not as dramatic of a story, but it was similar. Similar again. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll just try on being gay for a while, and only endeavoring to connect with men. And similarly, actually, what I love most about a sexual or romantic connection with another man is that seems to be more of a space for both of us to be both. That I can be masculine and feminine. That I can be held as I'll get to feel that dainty feminine thing that you were talking about in the arms of a man, but then in the next moment we could switch roles, and you can have all that with one person. That's
so important.
Yeah,
and it's such a beautiful thing that you've got to experience.
Yeah, but in the end, it seems also that, again, because of this cultural standard, that even a lot of gay men that are endeavoring to connect with other men are still very much killing or suppressing their own feminine energy. So they're very afraid of emotional intimacy or deep heart connection, all the feminine things that I've so enjoyed, and what I still really love about connecting with women is like, oh my God, it's so easy to breathe into the heart with you. Thank you. Thank God. But with men, it's like, nope, let's just have sex and that's it. No emotions, no anything. That's our luxury because we're both men. And so I've been noticing over the last couple of years, as I've been with more men than women, that my heart is still like aching for that feminine expression thing. Well, so, I'm kind of like giving it all up.
And I'm just going to say that I think that it comes with a fully embodied person.
Exactly.
So I think that you've just been experiencing things with people that aren't there. And whether they're in a male body or a female body, it's somebody that's going to be there. And what I mean by there is balanced in their masculine and feminine energy, so that you can be in that dance between the two of you, shifting back and forth. And that polarization I found in relationships with women, like you said, where when I'm experiencing that with women, my masculine leads, but then it's beautiful that we're able to balance each other. And so I've been bringing that more and more into my relationships with men, so that I can hold space for that for them. And I've now found that I've got so many very in touch men that want to express those things, and there's an outlet for it. And to be received by somebody like myself that can hold them compassionately and not create an expectation for them where they need to be experiencing something in a certain way or a certain time frame, or that they're going to show up in this way ever again.
Right.
That story. And so I think that the fluidity is, I think, what we're probably going to hit on a lot in this. And it comes back to what we've gone to a lot of times in regards to in the moment, being in play and being in a flow state. And so fluidity, that this like gender neutral, this fluid space that we can find in ourselves. It harkens back in my mind to my first studies in the intellect of spirituality with the Tao, was often around the middle point between the polarities, that it isn't one or the other, and it isn't about pendulum between the two of them, but finding that soft space in between. And I think when we can find that with each other and just kind of release all of the layers of what we perceive in each other and value something that's more of the core essence, then that's what we start to see in the people.
Well, and that's where I really wanted to go with this conversation, is that where's this overlap of sexuality and gender, because gender identity truly is a very distinctly different than a sexual orientation or sexual preference conversation. We're seeing so many more trans people that are feeling comfortable enough to come out and express and be who they are, and we're seeing it even in our general culture and society with the legalization of gay marriage, and then also some famous trans people that have begun to come into the mainstream, that we're beginning to loosen our grip on this very polarized, deficient and imprisoning perception of what our identity is as a human being and as a sexual creative human being. And this harkens back to the undervaluing or devaluing of our own creative power to create the life that we're living consciously, and that the way so many things are set up is to keep us from realizing that.
Exactly.
And so to me, the kind of partnership or romantic connections or sexual connections, in the end, it's like it doesn't really matter what our genitals are. What I'm yearning for is a reflection of wholeness, and that in that reflection of the yearning, the work is for me to and this is what I feel superhumans do, in our practice, is that we endeavor to inquire about our own internal masculine and feminine energies, and to realize that no matter what our gender identity is, whether, I identify as a male, as a man, but I also so many times on the inside feel like I'm relating to the world in much the way a woman does. And so I may identify with being in a male body, but as a person, I'm much more of a they.
Right.
I identify masculine and feminine energies together. And I've met lots of other female-bodied people that identify as they, or, experience a different way of relating to that. And so it doesn't matter if it's like, well, I very much identified as that. Mostly I'm a man, and I mainly run masculine energy. That's beautiful. But I also have this feminine here, and whatever it means to you, or vice versa for a woman, how they're working with their inner masculine. And in the end, I feel like where we're going in the new paradigm is gender identities and sexual orientations will dissolve, into nothingness, that we won't have them one of these days.
Right.
And that we can, any person can play with either polarity, but it'll be like a game, it'll be a fun, like, oh, what are you bringing today? Or you get to be that. But there's an acknowledgement of everything else that's there, and that we begin to. So the question with that, because a lot of times when I've really inquired in it, the fear is, it's like, well, where there would be no passion then, without that staunch polarity, where would the passion be? But my thing is I believe that our value or perception of what passion is will expand, so that even in the subtleties of the neutralities or the balancings, or in the more extremes that come, but they can flip. That will begin like more exciting. The flipping would be more exciting and passionate than what we thought of before.
That's beautifully put, and I think that's a topic that we're going to get into in our next episode around art and music also, around these storylines that have been built into our culture for so long, with the victim villain and the masculine and feminine and the submissive and the dominant, and when we look at those as these built-in cultural programs, and not that they are a given like gravity. It's not actually science. It's just a story. And so when we can see more of that, what you just said, the subtleties of it and the intricacies and the nuances, and when we look at the beauty of nature, that everything isn't so black and white. It's not so cut and dry. It's all so subtle, all these ways that things work together. And I think that when we start to recognize that that's who we are, is an intricate system within our own being, and an intricate system within the way that we interact with each other, that we can start to honor and value those more subtle points, and recognize that throughout a woman's cycle, per se, the month has the distinct chapters like the seasons, and she may generally be much more in a feminine energy, and then during a specific week she may take on everything and want to conquer the entire world and would like to really penetrate everything if she could. And that is her time of ovulation. She's just absolutely ripe for that. And then there's a time when she absolutely doesn't want to interact with anyone ever. And so to honor the subtleties of a woman's cycle is much like honoring the subtleties of relating with each other, and just our grander cycle of our gender and even our sexuality. That there's times in our course of our entire life that we may go completely inwardly. And I've done this numerous times. I did a very long stint of non-sexual energy with other people, and I never turned it off with myself, because it was actually not about stopping sexual energy. It was about cultivating it in myself and learning how to move those channels, and really learning how to stop my storylines when I'm in a sexual relationship, because the sexual relationship's me, right? So the storyline can't. I can't be like, oh, is he going to call me tomorrow? Yeah, she called me. So what I'm getting at with all of that, I think, is just the subtleties and the essence of the flow, and recognizing that we by putting even a label on it, by putting words to it, then it puts it into a box, and then then ourselves, we have to move out of that box into the next moment, versus just being a river and flowing. And I think that there's some really great things that are happening culturally where we are putting words to things, and then those words need to break away. And beyond those words is a river that leads to an ocean of really juicy communication without all of those words in the way.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that box or the cages of the prison in this context of some of the bars of our prison being our perception and or addiction or over-identification with who I am as a man, who I am as a woman, who I am as a gay man, who I am as a gay woman, who I am as a whatever, a trans man, who I am as a trans woman.
And this could be in race even.
Yeah, what's the fear there? What is the currency of the investment that we think that we're getting from
that identification?
Yeah, and suppressing every other part of ourselves, right? I've met, so many men specifically, they call it bi-curious, or they've experienced attractions or so many different things, but because it's so confused, it's automatically confusing, like scrambled in the brain. Well, then if I have that part of me, it must mean this, and it devalues all these other things about me. That's true. And so in the end, a lot of them will be gripped in so much fear and shame that it ends up being not expressed. And in the end, it's not even so much about sexual expression. It could just be about expressing feminine energy in so many other ways. Oftentimes it will come through with sexual energy, but I want to just explore that a little bit more. Again, our investment in this idea. Is it safer to just be who you, quote unquote, were born to be or meant to be or shaped to be by your environment and by your culture and by your parents or by what was most comfortable? And what does it really take to, and that's really our superhuman quality, this ravenous self-inquiry, into knowing ourselves fully and knowing where our investments lie and cultivating the conviction to rush towards our edges and to unlock the trapped energy that's in that overindulgence of safety or overindulgence of fear.
Well, I don't know if we've ever mentioned this before, but that ravenous hunger to move towards that edge, when we value that, then change is inevitable in our life. And so we don't have to be stuck in stagnant places and look towards this future self that we want and then have to write it all out. How am I going to get there? It's that ravenous hunger to find that edge that just gets you there. I just wanted to just have the little
rushing towards.
Yeah, you're just rushing towards that question. The question's in you, but really rushing towards that answer at the edge of yourself.
And how can we balance that? Another question I was going to come to you is who would you be if you weren't a woman, right? But to be careful in the atmosphere of which I'm actually asking that question. The mind wants to say, okay, if I'm not a woman, it wants to polarize that. So everything that you embrace and enjoy and love about being a woman doesn't have to be negated, right? That it can be integrated in. But even for a moment to know that, but so it can be a both.
So interesting.
Then to look over, who would you be if you weren't a woman? Right?
Well, the very first instinct, because I didn't think of any feminine quality. I thought of the literal, which is so funny because now I've been catching myself with that word, literal, because it has to be written to be literal. None of this is written unless this is going to be written later into a book. But what I was getting at with that, the first instinct I had was if I wasn't a woman, then I wouldn't have children. Because my first instinct was, in this life, I'm so grateful that I am a woman because I birthed 2 children. And to get to have experienced that, I think quite often of the fact that we all have a womb of creation. And so we're always birthing something, and we're pregnant with something, and then we're birthing it. And
is it possible to be a mother and not be a woman?
Of course. And I birthed children out of me. And having the experience of a being growing inside of you that is kicking you and stretching you. I have stretch marks on my belly that show a beautiful map of
Right.
my first child. And what my first instinct was, if I didn't have children, would be what if I wasn't a woman, if I was a man.
And that's such a beautiful, that's one of those qualities I was saying about embracing, about being a woman, that's a very unique, specific experience that you can only have as a female embodied person. And that's beautiful and wonderful. And so where did the mind go there?
My mind went to,
I would have to give that up, so I don't even know what this is over there, because I'm not going to give that up.
I would be the most solo man on the planet. It was the polarity.
Right.
Was what happened for
so
me. I wouldn't be tied to anything. I would be a totally free agent.
That's what I thought was going to happen, and that's what's intriguing to me, is this is what our mind does.
Yeah.
That the polarization is
so
totally
polarized all the way to the other direction.
Right. If I wasn't a woman, then I wouldn't be a mom. Then I would be this
free
man. Right?
I would be having love with everything and penetrating the world.
And that is a perception, a projection of what it is to be a man, right?
Right, of course.
Right.
Well, but I recognize that what some of my big work has been over the last couple of years has been seeing why do I get attraction in a relating sense towards particular aspects of men, and where in me does that lie? And so that was kind of a convoluted way of saying it, but where in me can I be that for myself? Where can I be that masculine for myself? And so then I'm seeing in these reflections, oh, wow, my masculine energy inside myself would show up that way. It would show up, and it does. And so now I get to be that for myself, and finding ways to nurture my feminine side with my own masculine, and vice versa. Use my feminine energy to nurture my own masculine. Be in that relationship. And so there has been a lot of internal story. I would be me. I would be exactly me. My same meanness would be there. In a physical sense, I wouldn't have created a child, and so maybe my timeline would be very, very different, because I wouldn't have created the same structures that I have based on being a parent.
There's a zooming in, and I feel in the context of this conversation, an emphasis or overemphasis on the physical, right? And that's what brings us back to it. It's like, I've got this penis or I've got this vagina, and that's who I am. I am this body. And what we know as superhumans is that this body is the instrument that expresses everything else that we really are. That's not male or female, man or woman. It just gets to play in this male or female or somewhere in between instrument, right? And so I feel like, let's ask that question again, and to really zoom in, because I'm feeling my mind did the exact same thing. Remember, the proclivity, the preoccupation with polarity on such a foundational level that we can't seem to shake out of it enough to really encounter this. I would be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my next, like, when I actually felt into it. I would still be me.
Yeah, and it's not so much about the physical experiences of what came through your body or was put in your body or what you did with your body's parts, but a greater identity, to have our primary investment, our identification as who we are, be that which we are in a soul form that then is integrated into this human personality and human body, where we can still enjoy and embrace all of the things that come with male bodies and female bodies and all those experiences. But again, it's an overlay. And I feel like what we were seeing in this conversation was the preoccupation or a higher investment or a higher attention being on the physical, and the other one not being able to see as much, right? Because there's too much focus. And that, again, it's not about making the other one go away. It's shifting the value so there can be a greater integration. So I'm just going to ask everyone listening, I'm going to ask myself and ask you again, who would you be if you were not a woman or a man? Who is that which is beyond gender or your sexual preferences or your sexual attractions or the spectrum of whatever that may be, or all your sexual experiences? Who would you be beyond that? Who are you beyond that?
Beautiful.
Yeah. I can feel the resonance of my soul awareness, or the observer, that which is animating, breathing life into this human expression and all other expressions. And I'm noticing how this soul awareness is marveling at the opportunity to experience polarity in the sense of it being a game of creation and of bringing about the physical materialization of the essence of that which it is, what God is, what universal energy and consciousness is, and how valuable the polarity is and necessary for that to happen. And still, the essential value of that embodiment is simply to create a container for the soul to express itself. And the essential value of the soul is, of course, infinite and limitless, not bound. And so I'm noticing my soul projecting seemingly splitting itself through this illusory lens of separation and creating two mirror images from that lens. And one image is a masculine form and the other image is a feminine form inside my own heart, inside my own body and my own beingness. And I'm noticing the expressions of soul coming into a language based in two variables, a masculine variable or a 1 and a feminine variable or a 0. And I'm saying all this computer code and computer language bursting out from that in a similar matrix. And in our masculine energy, I'm seeing the role of the masculine energy is to express, to project consciousness. And the role of the feminine energy is to receive, nurture, and gestate consciousness that she then, as the masculine is penetrating her, it's really her that's impregnating him with the fully gestated, fully grown creation that then he, like a servant, brings into the world or projects or manifests into the world. And now I'm seeing them actually flipping roles, that the soul is penetrating the inner feminine is penetrating the masculine, and then the masculine is penetrating the universe, which is a mirror image of what the soul is in form, or the earth, and then that is being the new feminine that's receiving it. So what kind of power could this kind of inquiry do, like what we just did? Perhaps on a daily basis, if we're endeavoring to go within and encounter our own, the shape of our masculine energy, its patterns, its strategies, it's the pain it's holding and why, the stories it's telling, and the same with our inner feminine. And to notice, is your inner feminine and masculine, are they on speaking terms?
Right.
Are they abusing each other?
Right.
Are they in love? Are they making love?
Yeah.
Or what are they doing? And how is that truly affecting, affecting the way that we're creating our lives? And where is the imbalance? Does the masculine need to remember that he's being asked to hold more space? And I think that's what's the beautiful thing, is when I was talking about earlier about my dynamic with my wife. It's not that dynamic is not valid or even seemingly pretty true, but the trick is that it's about an internal story or an internal drama instead of the way we're embodying it. And that was that overemphasis on the physical. Because I'm male, then I have to only embody the masculine. And the role of the masculine I've seen in the essential value of masculine energy is to hold space and support the brilliance of the feminine, and then to execute her commands, right? So, and the feminine energy is that which is open and magical and mysterious and open to spirit or to God or to the larger thing. But that has nothing to do with women or men. Right. Nothing. It has nothing to do with penis and vagina, right? It's an internal thing that's going on. And so when I relate to my own inner masculine, he is the strongest and most powerful and most, manly.
He's a container.
When he is on his knees in front of my inner feminine, adoring her.
Exactly.
Adoring her.
So that's
and she
what
then can trust him because he's adoring her to be her most fabulous self inside me, and then to know that he's going to carry out that divine impetus.
And that it is like what is it called? The aurora, the snake eating its own tail, right? So that ring, that is that like Kundalini energy spiral, and the masculine feminine dynamic, when especially if we were to even look at it like in a yin yang, that spiral energy, that it is a complete circuit. And so if we're valuing one side more than the other, and therefore cutting off energy to the other, then it becomes stagnant, or it gets resisted because we're so afraid of letting it out that it actually builds up and can be cancerous, or it can cause all these other issues in our beings. And I think that that's why we're so fresh to communicate about these things culturally, is because it's been so polarized for so long. It's been this very powerful drive of the masculine energy that came from a fear place to keep things separated, keep them divided, keep them easier to conquer, and keep them in a box, not for the honoring, but for the imprisoning of that was so terrifying, the feminine energy. And so the feminine energy pouring forth inside of all of us, just like we talked about in the episode about kids, is that chaos place. It's that place of pure magic, and that to a group of people trying to keep the world imprisoned is the most terrifying thing. And so if we see that in ourselves, where there's a part of us that is working in the old program structures, because we are born of meat and we're born of DNA, and it came down the line. And then there's the whole rest of us that knows we're infinite. And so when we can really listen to those places inside and see, is this an old operating system that I'm working with here that is saying I need to value this less, my feminine impulses, my passion for nature, my passion for play, my spontaneity, all of the things that are in the field of the feminine wilds. That is natural, that is vital, and that is probably the most crucial thing that we worship.
Its essential value is very high.
Its essential value is very high. And so when we can look at our valuing of those things, and when we can look at our programming inside of each day and each action that we're taking, when we have an impetus, say, to put on something fabulous and go out and strut because that's the thing that we want to do right now, and then we tell ourselves a story that isn't.
I wore heels last night.
Yes, you did. And you are fabulous. And I even know that you and I will take ourselves down a couple notches at times. And we're still some of the most courageous people in that regard. However, I think that it's the subtlety things too. Like, I would really like to take a bath right now, or read to myself. And so my masculine reads to my feminine. My masculine draws a bath for my feminine. It's the things that are the setting up the container for my feminine to relax into her bliss. That's the relationship I'm in.
Well,
and
love
so
that
instead
right
of
there,
looking for
you
a
just
partnership
said,
and saying, all right, when I have a partnership, we'll be in bed together and we'll read to each other. And then he'll rub my feet and he'll make me breakfast in bed. Fuck that. I'll do it now.
Yeah.
So I can do those things for myself. But when my feminine feels overtaxed and overworked, she often doesn't take the space that she needs. And so my masculine has to impose that on her and say, you know what? No, you lay down right now. We're going to
lay down right now.
We're just going to pamper you with rose oil. You're going to get some bubbly water
nothing.
And you're going to bliss out for a minute because you've been putting too many things on your plate. And so it's that balance of recognizing that there's a nurturing that needs to happen. And so it's been harder for me in this particular life to listen to my masculine and find ways for my feminine to honor that part of myself. And so there's where I'd like to lead the dialogue back to you. in those parts of yourself that you find are your masculine qualities, how do they want to be nurtured by the feminine?
Well, just as I was listening to you talk, I was just thinking about, if we go down a few layers, most of us are programmed to devalue feminine energy, whether we're male or female, and overvalue with an inflated value on the masculine. Because we're coming out of the dark ages, and we're coming out of the time where the masculine really needed to have that stronghold in order for us to survive. Again, there's an over-identification or an inflation of value on what safety is, right? The feminine cannot be, in a true feminine energy, in her wild, reckless abandon, there's nothing that she needs to be safe from. She is completely magnanimous, right?
Yeah.
But then
she is the ocean, she is the stars.
Right, but it's also super delicate too, and it's that which feels everything. And so once it begins to engage through separation here, then it's that with part of us that can be hurt, right? So then the masculine has to step up in this kind of protecting energy. And we've been in dangerous places, I think, as a human race for so long that we've forgotten that there could be a space inside of us that's so pure that it doesn't need to be protected or watched or suppressed or censored, right? And at the same time, there is value in it being structured and ordered enough so that there isn't a container where she actually can come and experience herself and not just be, scattered all over the place. And so when I think about things like the Me Too movement, and when I think about this still huge seeming rift between men and women, and there's so many retreats and women's circles and men's circles, and we're all in the conversation talking about it, and what I don't hear hardly anyone talking about is really owning, let's men and women get together and say, hey, you have an interrelationship with your masculine and feminine that's messed up. I have an interrelationship with my masculine and feminine that's messed up. And then we're just playing and projecting on each other and playing it all out. A lot of the women that are feeling called to defend the abuse of women, right? And that's very valid, right? And it's a reflection of how the inner feminine. We create a society where men must kill or abuse their inner feminine in order to be what a real man is, in order to meet his obligations, in order to be attractive to a female partner. He must exemplify all these male attributes. Well, what does he do with his inner feminine? She has no value. She gets chained away and stuffed. So then the women, the feminine, then they come and bring their feminine energy. Well, how do you think the men are going to treat them when that's how they're treating their inner feminine? They're going to play that right out. They abuse and suppress them. So then the feminine is abused and suppressed inside of women, and then what they've went to is now they have an overinflated value of their own inner masculine, and they're fighting back, and they're going to take control over, and they're going to, all of the, and not acknowledging the feminine in men or gay men that came forward that were trying to share about, I get your experience, and they were shut down and cast out, and a lot of the ways that I was hearing women speak was very aggressive, hateful even. That's no feminine energy in that. That's all masculine energy. Their own masculine showing up saying, I'm protecting her. And that's because that's what they're doing in their inner world. Right. They didn't have men to lean on, or the men would abuse them. So their own inner masculine had to become their protector because it wasn't there. And then now how do you think they're going to treat men? They're going to combat them. Even when the men are showing up being like, I want to connect with you in your feminine. And her masculine's like, my feminine is in the cage, in the dungeon, just like, your feminine. And so that's what I was so excited about. There's a place for all of it. There's a place for everyone's pure expression of their pain or whatever it is to be heard. And that's very true, that we all have a right to be heard. And to me, the real magic is when I feel like I have something that I feel like needs to be heard. Once it's heard, then I can release and expand into my favorite question. What else is here? Right. What else is here? What else is my feminine doing, my masculine doing? And I feel like it would be so powerful for women to do this work, to see how they can let their masculine off the hook a little bit. And like what you were just talking about, let's give him specific jobs. Your job is to make sure that I get nurtured. Right? And not to go out and fight and battle and war and protect and bring all this drama to me that I then have to combat against. No, it can be as simple as read to me and draw me a bath, right? Right. And let my feminine magic come out, and then write the business plan and get on the camera and speak the words, right? And that's the masculine's job, but to see if women can empower themselves to allow their inflated value of their own inner masculine to subside a little bit, enough to notice the men that are coming forth with their feminine energy, that are doing the same work, that they're taking some value off of that harsh masculine and putting it over into their own feminine, creative, nurturing, loving energy, and that the women and men together can begin to create a new space where the agent of transformation into the new paradigm is the expression of feminine energy. It is the age of the feminine, and in a matriarchy, masculine and feminine energies are in balance. It's not feminine rules over masculine, right? Masculine, when it's a patriarchy, masculine rules over feminine. But in a matriarchy, the feminine is equal, and they both are acting in total harmony. And so I feel like men and women both endeavoring to acknowledge and value the feminine awakening, specifically in men and male-bodied people, is paramount to shifting and shaping the atmosphere to where men can then turn to other men and say, hey, what you're doing to her is not acceptable. The way you're treating women is not acceptable anymore. And I, as a man, and the only way that I can know that, I can either do that from a place of I'm being a stronger man and I'm protecting them, or it can be I've realized and recognized and awakened my own feminine light within, so that the way that I connect with women and their feminine is so much richer, it's so much more tantric and beautiful, and that I'm standing, and that my masculine is inspiring their masculine to stand in this way, and we're inviting you into this work and saying what's not acceptable anymore. And so it's not from warring and battling, but to me that the difference between forcing someone to change versus giving them an invitation that is difficult for them to refuse, right? Because there's so much love and beauty and fullness in it. I feel where we're going, where I would really want to see us go. But that's everything that I just said is very controversial, and I know perhaps a lot of people listening, specifically women, and I love my inner woman, and I love you. I love most of the people that are closest to me in my life are women, and I love them very much, and I also have seen just so much of the women not realizing that and doing what they think they're doing to balance the scales, that they're actually contributing. They're reinforcing and perpetuating the problem.
I mean that is definitely something that you can go to a college, and if it's a really modern college, you'll learn about how the feminist movement has done a real disservice to the masculine, because it played this villain victim card so strong and pushed so against the masculine that we're emasculating an entire generation. So we're pushing against our elders by emasculating our children and treating our little boys like they have destroyed the feminine.
I've had that projected on me a lot. I have to represent all men here.
Really bad. It's really bad. And we could talk about that in regards to race also. That there's a lot happening in culture around people taking responsibility for their own actions moving forward by taking a lot of guilt on for what happened in the past. And so how can we find a place where we're honoring the people that we are as what they want to be called, as what they want to be, as seeing them as humans, seeing them as God incarnate, and recognizing that we still are working through the residuals of many, 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 many generations of a lot of trauma. And so we can see that and this can lead into other aspects of sexuality, I think, that we can talk about, where how do we release the traumas of the past through sexuality, and how can we then honor where we are as clear vessels and use sexuality as a tool to be beacons and transmitters for divine energy.
Well, I just got chills on that, because I really love that, especially as kind of like a wrap up to this conversation, just thinking about what is the superhuman quality. The superhuman quality as an awareness of our own androgynous nature, an awareness of our own inner masculine and inner feminine, and doing the conscious work and the inquiry work to bring those into balance. But I loved what you said about actually consciously using our sexuality in order to be a field of exploration and implementation to express what we're learning from our inner work. And to me, it's already here. It's hidden in our sexual taboos.
Yep.
Right, and that's where it is.
I wonder why things are taboo.
Yeah, it's in the taboos. It's in the perhaps the S&M world or the queer world. It's like, if you're a man and you have edges inside of you that is in your own feminine energy, and you wonder what it would be like to be penetrated, whether it's by another man or by a woman, that's wearing a strap on, or if it's more about what would it be like to actually engage sexually with another man, or to be maybe if it's not even overtly sexual, it's more like cuddling or tender affection with another male-bodied person. How would that activate your feminine? Is it scary? Why? Is it shameful? Why? Where is all this power?
Exactly.
And then how are these doorways to your own feminine energy that's hiding right there behind the fear and the shame and the taboo, and that you could set a space for yourself that you can explore and let go of the preoccupation with identity. It doesn't have to mean, does that mean I'm going to be bi now or gay now? It doesn't matter.
Right.
If you don't relate to that or resonate with that, just leave it behind. And the same if you're a woman, where's that, I've met so many women, especially here in Portland, who are just like, I love putting my strap on, and I'm just like, I don't fuck everything.
I definitely had a phase of that.
Both with other women in the female to female connection, but also with their male partners as well. And what is that like for you, or to be more verbal, or to even, for a lot of women, a lot of times there's this masculine energy of like, sometimes it just shows up in just asking for what you want. I want you to pleasure my body in this way, right? Being like this commanding thing. I know I find that very sexy in women when they bring a bit more of that aggressive energy. What are those taboos?
And how can you find safe ways to express that?
Yeah.
We do happen to live in a time where it is possible to meet people like you everywhere. There is an app for everything. And so whether it's something that is very taboo, or whether it's just a form of connection that is actually, this is a very taboo thing right now, cuddling.
Yeah.
It's a form of connection that is like the most natural thing that we do, and it's taboo now because people are becoming
place or whatever,
professional cuddlers, and they're keeping it in a PG rated space. They're just holding each other, and there's something really powerful about finding the connection, whether you're just doing the work to see in yourself what is that edge, and then finding someone to connect on that. You don't even have to follow through on the actual act.
It could be with gender exploration, like
whatever
men
it is,
wearing women's clothes or putting on some heels.
Reaching for those edges, and knowing that there are people to create containers everywhere. And there's a future episode we'll be talking about entheogenic medicine, and in this regard, it's kind of like that, where you want to create a safe container for that exploration. And so the more that
what would be a better way of saying safe container? Because what do we mean?
Yeah, because we're trying to get beyond safe.
Right.
So
that's again like.
Well, I think that I used that because that's such a cliche thing that we use in our culture.
It's overvalued and overdone.
But I think that the root to that is that you're creating a space, like we were saying, around the altering of your reality, ALTAR, that by creating an intentional space to enter into a newness in yourself, or reach an edge, that is going to give you a stronger foundation for.
I appreciate that. I was just asking Spirit in my mind, what would be the reframe? Because I could feel why you were saying safe in that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make much sense when you actually think about it.
Of course.
I'm going to create a safe container for you to be not safe, right? Because that's what we're inviting people to do, is to, when you go past those edges or go into that fear or into that shame, it's going to feel not safe, and it's meant to. Right, but it's not really.
But you can set
nothing's
yourself
really
up
gonna happen, right? Nothing's. If I'm so overly preoccupied with being safe, I'm never gonna let my energies fully go where they want to go. It's never gonna get there.
Right.
And so the reframe, you said it though, it's intentional.
Yeah.
What if safe becomes intentional?
There you
It's
go.
not about
It's an
being safe or not
intentional
safe. It's
container.
about I'm creating a specific container to hold me.
Yep.
Right? That's going to have an inherent safety,
Yep.
right? It's already there. We're just not overemphasizing it. We're just letting it be what it needs to be.
Right.
And saying my intention is to be in this space, be with these other people that are in a similar vibration, so that I can go into those unsafe, scary places and see what happens. Because I know that inside this space, my physical body is not going to come into imminent peril. So my safety check is done.
Right. Well, and so I think that you really hit on it with the word intentional. And as we wrap this into just the much larger blueprint of our series, of looking at the spokes to this wheel of co-creation and looking at the village, that when we come back to mentorship and that rites of passage and mentorship in the village was just always a part of it. And we don't have that anymore. And so as we come into our sexual identities and as we come into our exploration, there isn't somebody bouncing that off of us and talking with us about it. There's not anybody that is maybe a little further down the road in most of our lives that has been there that's talking with us. And so I think it's our duty when we become on the superhuman path, we have to find people that have done something like this, that have expressed themselves in these ways that we can use as muses, that we can use as friends in this process. And I think that is probably the most intentional of containers that we can create right now, is that communion with another in a transparent way, where you and I have that so innately. We've had that the entire friendship, where anything that could be taboo in any other part of your life with any other friend, you have to say to me. And it's because I absolutely am never going to look at you like you're crazy. I'm going to be like, all right, cool. And I think that is really the thing that we could offer to you guys in this episode, is if you don't have them in your life, first ask yourself why. Why are you holding yourself back from that? Or who are you keeping in your life that isn't meeting your needs in those ways? Because
are you seeing you in a certain way?
Are
or
you
identity?
able to be transparent with at least one person in your life about things that are your edges? If not, find someone. And maybe in the next episode, we'll figure out some solutions for people on how to find those people.
Well, and the work to do before that is, adding that to the daily practice is an inquiry into encountering the state of our own inner masculine and inner feminine, and how we are personally engaging the internal story. And then so that gives us much more information about the kinds of reflections that we want to call in or cultivate in our lives, like you were saying. Yeah. And
and then I think this wraps back to some of our previous conversations. There is no calling in. There's just calling forth in our own selves. And so in that internal inquiry, when we go back to our superhuman process with this, the listening, where is our yes, where is our no? When we're moving towards that yes and we're expanding, and then we feel an edge, not pushing back from it, but pushing through it, and creating intention with that towards our own evolution. And so if our evolutionary intention with this episode is that we're integrating our masculine and feminine in ourselves, becoming more aware of our own androgynous being, really being the embodiment of the galactic, penetrating the yoniverse, and that beautiful synergy of the sex that is everything. And being in grace and joy.
Come back to the bigger question of, is it really possible to create a world that works for everyone? And to me, it becomes very clear that it is possible once we see and value the true resources that we have, all this energy that we're sitting on appropriately or seeing it clearly, right? And that all the energy that we need to create a world that works for you, a life that works for you, and a world that works for everyone. I feel is the most central way to say it is that it's locked up in this drama between the masculine and the feminine. And the masculine is spending so much energy to suppress the feminine, and the feminine is spending so much energy being damsel in distress, right? All of that is
victim and fighting
or victim
against
and fighting
it.
or vengeful, whatever. All of that constitutes a lot of emotional energy,
Yeah.
a lot of mental energy.
When you
Look
can
at our
just tap
culture.
into your own
When you
internal
think about our
spring.
culture, how much attention are we putting on the fight between men and women and all the
Right.
different symbols that go with that? Well, what if the inner masculine and feminine, instead of warring with each other, we're making love, and all that energy that was going towards war is going towards love and creation? How
Yeah.
fast are we going to be able to create a world that works
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
when we're doing it?
That's
So-
it. That's it. So I think that that's the perfect wrap up right there, that everything is in us. It's all a mirror of us, the micro, the macro. Let's get real with making love to ourselves.
Yes, and each other. In a new way.
It start
In a new
inside.
way.
Don't try to come to me to make love to me unless you're making love to yourself.
That's right. In the words of RuPaul, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. See y'all
Until next
week.
time, namaste, bitches.
Namaste, bitches.